Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez crouched behind the crumbling concrete wall, his heart pounding as bullets whistled overhead. The abandoned warehouse district in Somalia had turned into a death trap. What was supposed to be a simple extraction mission had gone horribly wrong. His team of 6 Navy SEALs was now pinned down by at least 20 hostile fighters who seemed to know exactly where they were going. The intel had been bad from the start. Command told them they were retrieving a kidnapped aid worker from a lightly guarded compound. Instead, they walked straight into an ambush. Someone had sold them out. Rodriguez could feel the anger burning in his chest as he checked his ammunition. 3 magazines left. That would not last long. "Boss, we got movement on the east side," whispered Petty Officer Jake Sullivan over the radio. Sullivan was their sniper, positioned on the second floor of the warehouse. His voice was calm, but Rodriguez could hear the tension underneath. They had been in firefights before, but nothing like this. Rodriguez looked at his remaining team members. Sergeant Tommy Chun was applying pressure to a wound on his leg, blood seeping through his fingers. The shrapnel from the grenade that started this nightmare had torn into his thigh. Chief Petty Officer Mike Johnson was covering the west entrance, his rifle trained on the doorway. Petty Officer Luis Garcia was watching their 6, making sure no one came up behind them. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and red. Darkness would help them, but it would also help the enemy. Rodriguez knew they needed to move soon, or they would be trapped here all night. The extraction point was 2 kilometers away, but it might as well have been on the moon with all the hostiles between them and safety. "Sullivan, talk to me. What do you see?" Rodriguez spoke into his radio, keeping his voice low. 20-plus fighters, boss. They got us surrounded. AK-47s, couple of RPGs. They're setting up for a coordinated assault. I could take out maybe 3 or 4 before they zero in on my position. Rodriguez felt his stomach sink. His mind raced through their options, but none of them looked good. They could try to fight their way out, but Chun was wounded and they were outnumbered 4-1. They could wait for backup, but the nearest friendly forces were hours away. They could try to negotiate, but these fighters did not seem interested in talking. "Chun, how's that leg?" Rodriguez crawled over to his wounded teammate. "I can move, sir, but not fast. Don't worry about me." Chen's face was pale, but his eyes were determined. Rodriguez had served with Chun for 3 years. The man would crawl through broken glass before he would slow down the team. A burst of automatic fire erupted from the south entrance. Johnson returned fire immediately, his M4 carbine barking in response. "They're testing our defenses, sir. Probing for weak spots." Rodriguez made a decision. "All right, listen up. We're going to punch through the north wall. Sullivan, I need you to lay down suppressing fire on the east side. Johnson, you and Garcia will provide cover while Chun and I blow a hole in that wall. Once we're through, we move fast and quiet to the extraction point." It was not a great plan, but it was the only plan they had. Rodriguez pulled out a small explosive charge from his pack. The C4 would make enough noise to wake the dead, but it would also create their exit. As he prepared the charge, Rodriguez thought about his wife Maria and their 2 children back in San Diego. Isabella was 8 years old and wanted to be a doctor when she grew up. Little Miguel was only 4, but he already loved playing with toy soldiers. Rodriguez had promised Maria he would be careful on this deployment. He had promised he would come home. The sound of footsteps echoed through the warehouse. Their attackers were moving closer, tightening the noose. Rodriguez could hear them talking in Somali, coordinating their positions. These were not random thugs. They moved like trained fighters, like they had done this before. Movement on the west side, Johnson reported. 3 fighters moving toward the entrance. Rodriguez attached the detonator to the charge and pressed it against the north wall. 30 seconds, people. Get ready to move. Suddenly, the radio crackled with an unfamiliar voice. It was a woman, speaking in perfect English with a slight accent he could not place. "Navy SEALs, this is Ghost. I have eyes on your position. Do not detonate that charge." Rodriguez froze. Who was Ghost? How did she know what they were planning? "Unknown caller. Identify yourself. How did you get on our frequency?" "No time to explain, Lieutenant Rodriguez. You have bigger problems than you think." The fighters surrounding you are not local militia. They're trained mercenaries, and they're here for you specifically. Someone wants your team dead. Rodriguez felt a chill run down his spine. How did this woman know his name? How did she know about their situation? Ghost, I don't know who you are, but we need to move now. We're running out of time and ammunition. Trust me, Lieutenant. I'm here to help. In 60 seconds, I'm going to create a distraction on the south side. When you hear the explosion, move your team to the northeast corner of the building. There's a drainage tunnel that will get you out without being seen. Rodriguez looked at his team. Johnson was shaking his head, clearly skeptical. Garcia was checking his weapon, ready for anything. Chun was struggling to his feet, determined not to be left behind. Sullivan's voice came over the radio from his sniper position. Boss, I see something strange. There's someone on the roof of the building across the street. Can't make out details in this light, but they're in a concealed position with what looks like a high-powered rifle. Ghost, is it you on the roof? Rodriguez asked into the radio. Affirmative. I've been tracking this mercenary group for 3 days. They ambushed a German aid convoy last week and killed everyone. You walked into their trap, but you don't have to die here. Rodriguez had to make a decision. Trust an unknown woman with a sniper rifle or stick with his original plan. Every instinct told him to trust his training and his team, but something in the woman's voice made him hesitate. She sounded confident, professional. She sounded like someone who knew what she was doing. Before he could respond, an explosion rocked the south side of the building. The sound was deafening, and dust rained down from the ceiling. Shouts erupted from outside as the mercenaries scrambled to respond to the new threat. Move now! Ghost's voice cut through the chaos. Northeast corner. Go! Rodriguez made his choice. You heard her. Move, move, move. The team sprinted toward the northeast corner, Chun limping, but keeping up with help from Garcia. Rodriguez could see the drainage tunnel Ghost had mentioned. It was partly hidden by debris, but it was there. As they reached the tunnel entrance, Rodriguez heard the distinctive crack of a high-powered sniper rifle from across the street. That's one down, Ghost reported calmly. Keep moving. The tunnel leads to a storm drain system. Follow it north for 200 meters, then take the first right. That will bring you up near a mosque. From there, you can reach your extraction point. Rodriguez looked back at the warehouse as his team disappeared into the tunnel. Through a broken window, he could see muzzle flashes as the mercenaries fired at Ghost's position. She was drawing their attention, giving his team time to escape. But she was one person against 20. How long could you hold them off? Ghost, what about you? You're outnumbered. Don't worry about me, Lieutenant. I've been doing this longer than you might think. Just get your team to safety. As Rodriguez crawled into the tunnel behind his men, he wondered who Ghost really was. How had she found them? Why was she helping them? And how did she know so much about the mercenaries who had ambushed them? The tunnel was dark and narrow, filled with the smell of stagnant water and decay. Rodriguez used his night vision goggles to navigate, following Garcia, who was helping Chun move through the cramped space. The sound of gunfire echoed behind them, growing fainter as they moved deeper into the drain system. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, they reached the junction Ghost had described. Rodriguez could see light ahead, filtering down through a storm drain cover. Fresh air carried the sound of evening prayers from the nearby mosque. Sullivan, what's your status? Rodriguez whispered into his radio. Clear the warehouse, sir. Following the tunnel as instructed. Ghost saved our lives back there. Rodriguez nodded, even though no one could see him in the darkness. Ghost had saved their lives, but he still had no idea who she was or what she wanted in return. In his experience, nothing came free in places like Somalia. They emerged from the storm drain into a narrow alley beside the mosque. The familiar smell of cooking fires and spices filled the air. Normal life continuing while a battle raged just a few blocks away. Rodriguez checked his GPS. The extraction point was 800 meters to the north. Ghost, we're clear of the tunnels. What's your status? Silence. Rodriguez tried again. Ghost, do you copy? Still nothing. Rodriguez felt a knot form in his stomach. Had she been killed helping them escape? He looked at his team, all of them thinking the same thing. They owed their lives to a woman they had never met, and now she was gone. "Sir, we need to move to the extraction point," Johnson said quietly. "The helicopter will be there in 20 minutes. Rodriguez nodded. Their mission was to survive and get home. Ghost had given them that chance, and he would not waste it. But as they moved through the darkened streets of Mogadishu, Rodriguez could not stop thinking about the mysterious woman with the sniper rifle who had appeared just when they needed her most. The extraction went smoothly. The helicopter touched down in a cloud of dust, and within minutes they were airborne, heading toward the safety of the USS Boxer. As Rodriguez looked down at the city lights fading below them, he made a silent promise. Somehow, someday, he would find out who Ghost was and repay the debt he owed her. What Rodriguez did not know was that Ghost was very much alive, watching their helicopter disappear into the night sky from her new position on a different rooftop. She had already moved 3 times since the firefight ended, staying ahead of the mercenaries who were still looking for her. Dr. Elena Vasquez lowered her rifle and allowed herself a small smile. The mission was complete. The SEAL team was safe, and she had gathered valuable intelligence on the mercenary group that had been terrorizing aid workers in the region. But this was just the beginning. The men who had ambushed Lieutenant Rodriguez and his team were part of something much larger, something that threatened not just American forces, but innocent civilians throughout East Africa. Elena packed her equipment with practiced efficiency. She had been a sniper for 15 years, first with the Spanish Special Forces, then as a private contractor. But this mission was personal. The mercenaries had killed her friend Sarah, a doctor who had been trying to help refugees in the region. Elena had sworn on Sarah's grave that she would bring them to justice. As she prepared to leave her position, Elena's satellite phone buzzed with an encrypted message from her handler. New intelligence had come in. The mercenary group was planning something big, and they needed to be stopped. Elena studied the message, her expression growing grim. The game was just beginning, and she had a feeling that Lieutenant Rodriguez and his team would be involved whether they wanted to be or not. The next phase of her mission would take her deep into the heart of enemy territory, where the line between friend and enemy was never clear. But first, she needed to disappear back into the shadows where she belonged. Elena Vasquez was many things: a sniper, a soldier, a woman seeking justice for her fallen friend. But to the world, she was simply Ghost, and ghosts were very good at vanishing when they needed to. 3 weeks after the warehouse incident in Mogadishu, Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez sat in a briefing room aboard the USS Boxer, staring at satellite photos spread across the table. The images showed a remote compound in the Ethiopian highlands, surrounded by dense forest and protected by natural rock formations that made it almost impossible to approach undetected. Captain Sarah Mitchell, the mission commander, pointed to the largest building in the compound. Intelligence indicates this is where they're holding the hostages. 12 aid workers from various international organizations, kidnapped over the past 2 months. The same mercenary group that ambushed your team in Somalia is responsible. Rodriguez studied the photos more carefully. The compound was a fortress. High walls, guard towers, and only one obvious entrance. It would be a suicide mission to assault it directly. What about the hostages? Do we know their condition? Satellite imagery shows movement in the main building. We believe they're being held in the basement level. The problem is, our sources indicate the mercenaries are planning to move them soon. This might be our only chance. Sergeant Tommy Chun, his legs still wrapped in bandages from the warehouse firefight, leaned forward. "Sir, with respect, this looks like another trap. These guys knew exactly where to find us last time. How do we know this intel is good?" Captain Mitchell's expression was grim. "We don't, but we have 12 innocent people who will die if we don't act. The Ethiopian government has given us permission to operate in their territory, but only for 48 hours. After that, we're on our own." Rodriguez looked at his team. Chief Petty Officer Mike Johnson was checking his gear with mechanical precision. Petty Officer Luis Garcia was studying the compound layout, already planning entry routes. Petty Officer Jake Sullivan was cleaning his sniper rifle, preparing for another long-range assignment. They were good men, the best he had ever served with. But they had barely escaped with their lives 3 weeks ago. "What about backup?" Rodriguez asked. "Are we going in alone again?" "Negative. This time you'll have air support standing by. 2 Apache helicopters will be in the area, ready to provide cover if things go bad. But the compound's location in the mountains limits their effectiveness. Most of the work will have to be done on foot." Rodriguez nodded, but something still bothered him. The mercenaries had proven they were well-informed and well-equipped. Walking into their stronghold felt like walking into another ambush. "Captain, what about Ghost? Any intelligence on the woman who helped us in Mogadishu?" Captain Mitchell's expression changed slightly. "That's classified, Lieutenant. All I can tell you is that Ghost is not part of this operation. You're on your own." But Rodriguez had not survived 3 combat deployments by accepting incomplete information. After the briefing ended, he approached Captain Mitchell privately. "Ma'am, Ghost saved my team's lives. She knew things about the enemy that our intelligence missed. If she's operating in the area, we need to coordinate with her." "Rodriguez, Ghost is a ghost for a reason. She operates outside normal channels, outside normal rules. The Pentagon doesn't even acknowledge her existence officially. If she shows up during your mission, that's her choice. But don't count on it." The helicopter insertion went smoothly. The team fast-roped into a clearing 5 kilometers from the target compound, their night vision gear allowing them to navigate the rocky terrain in complete darkness. The plan was simple: infiltrate the compound, locate and extract the hostages, and get to the extraction point before dawn. But as they approached the outer perimeter, Rodriguez felt the familiar tingle of unease that had saved his life many times before. Something was wrong. The compound was too quiet. No guards walking the walls, no lights in the towers. Either the mercenaries had abandoned the place, or they were waiting for something. "Sullivan, what do you see?" Rodriguez whispered into his radio. From his overwatch position 800 meters away, Sullivan studied the compound through his scope. "No movement, sir. Place looks deserted. But the vehicles are still there. 3 trucks and an armored personnel carrier." Rodriguez made a decision. "Chun, Garcia, circle around to the east wall. Johnson, you're with me on the main entrance. Something doesn't feel right about this." They moved like shadows through the darkness, using every piece of cover the rocky landscape provided. Rodriguez had trained for missions like this for years, but he could not shake the feeling that they were being watched. The hair on the back of his neck stood up as they reached the compound walls. That was when he heard it, a woman's voice speaking softly in his earpiece. "Lieutenant, this is Ghost. Stop where you are." Rodriguez froze, his heart rate spiking. How'd she gotten on their frequency again? "Ghost, where are you?" "Close enough to save your life again. The compound is rigged with explosives. Motion sensors will trigger the charges if you get any closer. Your hostages are not there." "What do you mean?" "Intelligence showed movement inside the buildings. The movement you saw was mercenaries setting up the trap. The real hostages are being held at a secondary location 15 kilometers north of here. You're walking into another ambush, just like Mogadishu." Rodriguez felt anger burning in his chest. How many times would they be used as bait? "How do you know all this?" "Because I've been tracking this group for months. They killed my friend, and I've made it my mission to destroy them. But right now, those 12 hostages are more important than my revenge." Rodriguez looked at his team, spread out around the compound's perimeter. If Ghost was right, they were minutes away from walking into a death trap. But if she was wrong, 12 innocent people would die because he hesitated. "Prove it," he said into his radio. "Show me the trap." A few seconds later, a small stone landed near the main entrance of the compound. The explosion that followed lit up the night sky like daylight. The blast was so powerful that Rodriguez felt the ground shake beneath his feet, even though he was 100 meters away. Satisfied, Ghost's voice was calm, professional. "The whole compound is wired. If you had gone through that entrance, none of you would have made it out alive. Where are you?" Rodriguez demanded. I want to see you face to face. Northeast ridge, 300 meters from your position. Come alone. Rodriguez made his choice. Johnson, maintain position here. Everyone else, hold your positions and wait for my signal. I'm going to talk to our guardian angel. The climb to the ridge was steep and treacherous in the darkness. Rodriguez used his night vision to navigate between loose rocks and thorny bushes. As he reached the top, he saw a figure lying prone behind a large boulder, a sniper rifle trained on the compound below. The woman turned as he approached, and Rodriguez got his first clear look at Ghost. She was younger than he had expected, maybe early 30s, with short dark hair and intelligent brown eyes. Her face was painted with camouflage, and she wore the kind of advanced tactical gear that cost more than most soldiers made in a year. Dr. Elena Vasquez, she said, extending her hand. Spanish Special Forces, retired. These days I work freelance. Dr. Rodriguez shook her hand, surprised by her firm grip. Medical degree from Madrid University. I was planning to be a battlefield surgeon until I discovered I was better at preventing casualties than treating them. She gestured toward a rifle. 750 meters effective range. I could put a bullet through a coin at that distance. Rodriguez studied her face in the dim starlight. Why are you helping us? What do you want in return? Elena's expression hardened. 3 months ago, Dr. Sarah Chun was working at a refugee camp in Sudan. She was treating children who had been wounded by landmines. The same mercenary group that ambushed you kidnapped her convoy and executed everyone in it. Sarah was my closest friend. I'm sorry for your loss, but that doesn't explain how you keep finding us or how you know so much about enemy operations. Elena pulled out a tablet computer and showed him satellite imagery of the region. I've been hunting this group for 12 weeks. Their leader is a man named Viktor Kozlov, former Spetsnaz. He's turned mercenary work into a science. They study their targets for weeks, learn their tactics, then set up elaborate traps. How do you know the hostages aren't in that compound? Because I've been watching them move the captives 3 times in the past week. They use the compound as bait while keeping the real prisoners at mobile locations. It's smart. Any rescue attempt hits empty buildings while they escape with their leverage. Rodriguez looked down at his team, still positioned around the rig compound. Where are the hostages now? Elena switched to a different satellite image. Mining facility 40 kilometers northeast of here. It's built into the side of a mountain. Only one way in or out. Kozlov thinks he's safe there. That's outside our area of operations. We don't have permission to cross into that territory. Then 12 innocent people die because of bureaucracy. Elena's voice carried a hard edge. Your choice, Lieutenant. Follow orders and let them die, or trust me and save their lives. Rodriguez found himself facing the same impossible decision he had made in Mogadishu. Trust an unknown operative with a personal agenda, or stick to his mission parameters and potentially fail his objective. He looked at Elena's face, searching for any sign of deception. If I agree to this, what's the plan? Elena smiled for the first time since he had met her. The mining facility has one weakness. The ventilation system uses natural caves that connect to the surface. I can get your team inside without being detected, but it has to be tonight. Kozlov is moving the hostages again tomorrow. Rodriguez made his decision. What do you need from us? For the next hour, Elena briefed Rodriguez on the layout of the mining facility, the guard rotation she had observed, and the most likely location where the hostages were being held. Her intelligence was detailed and professional, clearly the result of days of careful surveillance. There's something else you need to know, Elena said as they prepared to leave the ridge. Kozlov has been specifically targeting American Special Forces. The warehouse in Mogadishu, this compound here, they're not random operations. He's trying to capture or kill SEAL teams. Why? Because someone is paying him to do it. I don't know who yet, but there's a bigger conspiracy here. Kozlov is just the muscle. Rodriguez felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. You think we have a leak in our command structure? I think someone wants American Special Forces out of East Africa, and they're willing to pay mercenaries to make it happen. The question is who benefits from that. As they made their way back down the ridge, Rodriguez realized that this mission had become about much more than rescuing hostages. They were walking into the center of a web of conspiracy and betrayal that reached far beyond the mountains of Ethiopia. When they reached the bottom, Rodriguez called his team together and explained the situation. The reactions were mixed. Johnson was skeptical about trusting Elena completely. Chen was worried about operating outside their authorized area. Garcia was ready for action regardless of the risks. Sullivan just wanted to complete the mission and get home to his family. Sir, we're talking about a 40-kilometer movement through hostile territory to assault a fortified position, Johnson pointed out. Even with Ghost's help, the odds are not good. The odds weren't good in Mogadishu either, Rodriguez replied. But we made it out because someone was watching our backs. I think Ghost has proven herself. Elena had been listening to their discussion. Gentlemen, I understand your concerns, but I've been tracking Kozlov for 3 months. This is our best chance to stop him and save those hostages. If we wait, they'll disappear into the wilderness and we'll never find them. Rodriguez looked at each member of his team. These men had followed him through 3 deployments and countless dangerous missions. They trusted his judgment, but he was asking them to trust a stranger with their lives. It's your call, sir, Chen said quietly. We're with you either way. Rodriguez nodded. Then we do this. But we do it right. Elena, you lead us to the facility. We go in fast and quiet, extract the hostages, and get out before anyone knows we were there. As they gathered their equipment and prepared to move out, Rodriguez could not shake the feeling that they were walking deeper into a trap that had been months in the making. But 12 innocent lives hung in the balance, and he had sworn an oath to protect the innocent, wherever they might be. The trek through the mountains would take them the rest of the night. By dawn, they would either be heroes who had saved 12 lives, or they would be dead in a remote valley where no one would ever find them. The mining facility appeared out of the pre-dawn mist like something from a nightmare. Built into the side of a mountain, its concrete structures seemed to grow directly from the rock itself. Rusted machinery and abandoned equipment scattered around the entrance gave it the appearance of a place that time had forgotten. But Rodriguez could see fresh tire tracks in the mud and newly installed security cameras mounted on the buildings. Elena led them to a concealed position overlooking the facility from 800 meters away. Through his binoculars, Rodriguez could see guards patrolling the perimeter. These were not amateur fighters. They moved with military precision, their weapons clean and well-maintained. Kozlov had trained his men well. The main entrance leads to administrative buildings, Elena whispered, pointing to a map she had drawn during her surveillance. But the real facility is underground, 3 levels carved into the mountain. The hostages are being held on the lowest level, in what used to be a storage area for mining equipment. Sergeant Chun studied the facility through his scope. I count 12 guards outside. How many inside? At least 20 more based on the number of vehicles and the shift rotations I've observed. The good news is that the underground levels have poor radio reception. Once we're inside, they won't be able to coordinate as effectively. Rodriguez felt the familiar weight of command responsibility settling on his shoulders. 30-plus hostiles in a fortified position, with civilians in the crossfire. It was the kind of scenario that ended military careers and haunted soldiers for the rest of their lives. Show me the ventilation system, he said. Elena led them along a narrow ridge to a point where several cave openings were visible in the mountainside. These are natural caves that were incorporated into the mining operations ventilation system. They connect to the lowest level where the hostages are held. The passages are narrow, but we can get through. Petty Officer Garcia examined the cave entrance. Sir, if they know about these caves, it could be another trap. I've been watching for 3 days, Elena assured them. No guards posted at the cave entrances. Kozlov is overconfident. He thinks the facility is impregnable from the front, so he's not watching his back door. Rodriguez made his decision. Garcia and Chun, you're with me through the caves. Johnson, you and Sullivan find an overwatch position where you can provide sniper support. When we extract the hostages, we'll need covering fire to reach the rendezvous point. Chief Johnson nodded. What about air support? Are the Apaches still available? Rodriguez checked his GPS and radio. We're too far from the authorized operational area. The helicopters can't reach us here. We're on our own. As they prepared to enter the caves, Elena pulled Rodriguez aside. There's something else. I intercepted communications between Kozlov and his employer yesterday. They're planning to execute the hostages at dawn as a message to other aid organizations. We have maybe 2 hours before they start killing people. Rodriguez felt his blood run cold. Dawn was less than 90 minutes away. Why didn't you tell me this earlier? Because I knew you would make the same decision regardless. But your men deserve to know what they were signing up for first. Rodriguez looked at his team, already moving toward the cave entrance with professional efficiency. Chun was struggling slightly with his wounded leg, but had not complained once during the long trek through the mountains. Garcia was checking his equipment one final time, preparing for close-quarters combat in confined spaces. Johnson and Sullivan were moving to their overwatch position, ready to provide the covering fire that might save all their lives. These men trusted him to bring them home safely. Elena was asking him to risk their lives for strangers in a foreign country, based on intelligence from a woman they had known for less than 6 hours. But Rodriguez also knew that if they walked away now, 12 innocent people would die, and Kozlov would continue his campaign of terror against aid workers throughout the region. Let's go save some lives, Rodriguez said quietly. The cave system was more extensive than Elena had indicated. They crawled through passages barely wide enough for their shoulders, the sound of dripping water echoing in the darkness around them. Rodriguez used his night vision goggles to navigate, but the complete darkness and confined space was disorienting even with electronic assistance. After 30 minutes of crawling, they reached a metal grate that opened into the underground facility. Elena produced a set of bolt cutters and carefully removed the barrier. The sound of voices could be heard from somewhere beyond the opening. 2 guards in the corridor, Elena whispered, pulling out a silenced pistol. I can take them without raising an alarm. Rodriguez grabbed her wrist. No killing unless absolutely necessary. We're here to save lives, not take them. Elena's eyes flashed with anger. These men murder my friend. They've kidnapped 12 innocent people. They don't deserve mercy. Maybe not, but we're not executioners. We do this clean. Elena holstered her weapon reluctantly. Your rules, Lieutenant. But if your mercy gets those hostages killed, their blood is on your hands. They emerged from the ventilation shaft into a dimly lit corridor carved from solid rock. The air was thick with the smell of diesel fuel and unwashed bodies. Rodriguez could hear voices speaking in Russian and Arabic from different directions. The facility was larger than he had expected, with multiple corridors branching off from the main passage. Garcia took point, his submachine gun ready as they moved deeper into the underground complex. They passed empty offices and storage rooms filled with abandoned mining equipment. Rodriguez noticed that the electrical system had been recently upgraded, with new cables running along the ceiling. Kozlov had invested significant resources in turning this abandoned mine into a functional base of operations. They reached a junction where 3 corridors intersected. Elena checked her hand-drawn map and pointed left. The storage area where they're holding the hostages is through that passage. But there's a guard post at the halfway point. Rodriguez could see light coming from around a bend in the corridor. 2 men were talking quietly in Russian. He recognized some of the words from his language training. They were complaining about having to work night shifts while their comrades slept. Garcia, can you get around behind them? Rodriguez whispered. Garcia studied the junction and shook his head. Only one way in, sir. But I can create a distraction. Before Rodriguez could object, Garcia pulled out a small stone and threw it down the right corridor. The sound echoed through the tunnels, and the Russian voices stopped immediately. Footsteps approached their position as the guards came to investigate. Rodriguez and Elena pressed themselves against the wall as two armed men rounded the corner. Garcia struck from behind, using a sleeper hold to render the first guard unconscious without making a sound. Rodriguez tackled the second man, clamping a hand over his mouth while Elena zip-tied his hands and feet. "How much farther?" Rodriguez asked as they dragged the unconscious guards into an empty office. 50 meters. But there's another problem. The storage room has a reinforced door with an electronic lock. I don't know the combination. Rodriguez felt precious time slipping away. Dawn was approaching, and they still had not even located the hostages. "Can you bypass the lock?" "Not without specialized equipment we don't have." They reached the storage room and found a heavy steel door with a digital keypad. Rodriguez could hear voices from inside, speaking in English. The hostages were alive, but the door might as well have been a bank vault for all the good it did them. Chen examined the lock mechanism. "Sir, I can blow the door with C4, but the noise will bring every guard in the facility running." Rodriguez was about to give the order when Elena grabbed his arm. "Wait, I have a better idea." She pulled out her satellite phone and scrolled through the contact list until she found what she was looking for. "I've been monitoring their communications for weeks. Kozlov uses the same radio frequency for all operations." Elena set her radio to the correct frequency and spoke in fluent Russian. "Guard Post 3, this is Control. Open Storage Room 7 for prisoner transfer." Rodriguez listened in amazement as a voice responded from inside the storage room. A few seconds later, the electronic lock clicked open. "How did you know that would work?" he whispered. "Because men like Kozlov rely on rigid command structures. Their soldiers are trained to follow orders without question." Elena smiled grimly. Sometimes the best weapon is the enemy's own discipline. The storage room was larger than Rodriguez had expected, with a dozen people sitting on the floor in various states of exhaustion and fear. They were aid workers from different organizations, ranging in age from mid-20s to late 50s. Most appeared to be in decent physical condition, though several showed signs of rough treatment. A woman with graying hair and intelligent eyes stood up as they entered. "Are you American military?" "Yes, ma'am. Lieutenant Rodriguez, United States Navy. We're here to get you out." The relief on the hostages' faces was overwhelming. Several people started crying. Others tried to stand on shaky legs after days of confinement. Rodriguez could see that some of them were injured, though none appeared to be in critical condition. "How many guards are watching this facility?" Rodriguez asked the woman who had spoken first. "Dr. Susan Morrison, Doctors Without Borders," she replied. "I've counted at least 30 men, maybe more. They work in shifts, so there are always fresh guards on duty. Their leader, Kozlov, is planning something for this morning. The guards have been more agitated than usual." Elena checked her watch. 40 minutes until dawn. "We need to move now." Rodriguez assessed the hostages' condition. Most could walk, but Dr. Morrison was supporting an older man who appeared to have a leg injury. Moving 12 civilians through cave passages and across mountainous terrain would be slow and dangerous. "Can everyone make it through narrow spaces?" "We're going out through a cave system." Dr. Morrison nodded. "We'll manage. We've all been through survival training as part of our aid work preparation." As they prepared to leave, Rodriguez heard footsteps in the corridor outside. Multiple sets of boots, moving fast. Someone had discovered the unconscious guards. "Contact front," Garcia called out as armed men appeared in the doorway. The firefight was brief, but intense. Garcia's submachine gun chattered as he laid down suppressing fire, while Rodriguez herded the hostages toward the back of the storage room. Elena had found an alternative exit, a maintenance tunnel that connected to another part of the ventilation system. "Move, move, move," Rodriguez shouted as bullets sparked off the concrete walls around them. Chun was covering their rear, his rifle barking steadily as more mercenaries joined the fight. Rodriguez could hear Kozlov's voice over the facility's public address system, speaking in English with a thick Russian accent. "American soldiers You are trapped underground with nowhere to run. Surrender now, and I will allow the hostages to live. Continue to fight, and I will execute them one by one." Rodriguez ignored the ultimatum as he helped the injured hostage into the maintenance tunnel. Elena was already leading the first group of civilians through the narrow passage. The sound of automatic weapons fire was getting closer as more mercenaries converged on their position. Chen Garcia, fall back. We're leaving. Rodriguez was the last one into the tunnel, sealing the entrance behind him with a small explosive charge. The blast would slow down their pursuers, but would not stop them for long. They had maybe a 10-minute head start before Kozlov's men found another way around. The return trip through the cave system was a nightmare. 12 exhausted civilians crawling through passages designed for ventilation equipment, not human transit. Rodriguez could hear some of the hostages crying from claustrophobia and fear. Dr. Morrison kept everyone calm with quiet words of encouragement, but Rodriguez knew they could not maintain this pace for long. They emerged from the caves just as the eastern sky began to lighten with the approach of dawn. Rodriguez had never been so happy to see open sky, but their problems were far from over. They were 800 meters from the mining facility with 12 civilians, 3 wounded team members, and 30 armed mercenaries who would be pursuing them within minutes. "Johnson, Sullivan, what's your status?" Rodriguez called over the radio. "In position, sir. We can see movement at the facility entrance. Looks like they're organizing search teams." Rodriguez looked at the exhausted hostages and made a difficult decision. "Elena, can you get these people to the extraction point? I need to slow down the pursuit." Elena shook her head. "We stay together. I didn't come this far to abandon you now." Dr. Morrison stepped forward. "Lieutenant, most of us are in better shape than we look. We've been hiking in remote areas for years as part of our work. If you can buy us a head start, we can make it to your extraction point." Rodriguez felt the weight of command crushing down on him. Every decision could mean the difference between life and death for 15 people. Dawn was breaking over the mountains, eliminating their cover of darkness. In 30 minutes, Kozlov would have helicopters in the air and tracking dogs on their trail. But looking at the faces around him, Rodriguez saw something he had not expected: determination. These aid workers had chosen to work in the most dangerous places on Earth because they believed in helping others. They were not going to give up now. "All right," Rodriguez said. "We do this together. Elena, lead the way to the extraction point. Chun, you and Garcia watch our flanks. Johnson and Sullivan leapfrog with us and provide overwatch. We move fast, but we move smart." As they started across the rugged terrain toward their distant rendezvous point, Rodriguez heard the sound of vehicles starting up at the mining facility. The chase was on, and the next few hours would determine whether they made it home as heroes or died as footnotes in a classified military report. The sound of helicopter rotors echoed across the Ethiopian mountains as Rodriguez led his group of rescued hostages through a maze of rocky canyons and dense forest. The extraction point was still 12 kilometers away, and Kozlov's forces were closing in from multiple directions. What had started as a rescue mission was now a desperate race for survival. Dr. Susan Morrison was proving to be tougher than Rodriguez had expected. Despite being in her 50s and having spent 3 weeks in captivity, she was keeping pace with his trained operators while helping the injured hostage, Dr. James Parker, who had suffered a broken ankle during the initial kidnapping. The other 10 aid workers were spread out in a tactical formation that Elena had taught them during their brief rest stops. "Sullivan, talk to me," Rodriguez whispered into his radio as they paused behind a cluster of large boulders. "3 vehicles moving up the valley road, sir. Looks like they're trying to get ahead of us and cut off our route to the extraction point. I count at least 15 men." Rodriguez studied his map. Kozlov was smart, using his superior numbers and knowledge of the terrain to box them in. The helicopter circling overhead was coordinating the ground search, directing teams toward their position like a deadly game of chess. Elena appeared beside him. having scouted ahead while the group rested. There's a problem. The valley narrows up ahead into a choke point. If Kozlov gets his men positioned there before us, we'll be trapped. Rodriguez felt the walls closing in around them. His team was exhausted from the long night operation. The hostages were slowing them down despite their best efforts, and the enemy had every advantage. But surrender was not an option. Kozlov had already proven he was willing to execute prisoners. What about alternate routes? Rodriguez asked. Elena shook her head. The terrain is too rough for the civilians. This valley is the only practical way to reach your extraction point. Dr. Morrison crawled over to join their conference. Lieutenant, what if some of us created a distraction? Draw their attention while the others escape? Absolutely not. We all go home together or not at all. Elena was studying the valley ahead through her binoculars. There might be another option. The helicopter is the real problem. Without aerial coordination, Kozlov's ground teams will have trouble finding us in this terrain. Rodriguez followed her gaze to the Russian-made helicopter circling like a vulture overhead. It was an older model, probably left over from Soviet operations in the region during the 1980s. But it was armed with machine guns and rockets, making it a formidable opponent for a ground team. You thinking what I think you're thinking? Rodriguez asked. Elena smiled grimly. I've shot down aircraft before, but I'll need to get a high ground for a clear shot. Rodriguez looked at the steep ridge rising to their west. It would take Elena at least 30 minutes to reach a position where she could engage the helicopter effectively. Meanwhile, Kozlov's ground teams would be closing the trap. Garcia, Chun, what's your ammunition status? About 60 rounds each, sir, Garcia reported, plus whatever's left in the captured weapons from the facility. It was not much for a prolonged firefight against 30 mercenaries. Rodriguez made a tactical decision that would either save them all or get them all killed. Elena, go for the helicopter. Take Sullivan with you for security. The rest of U.S. will hold this position and make them think we're all still here. When you bring down that bird, we move fast for the extraction point. Elena nodded and gathered her equipment. Give me 40 minutes. And, Lieutenant, when that helicopter goes down, the explosion will tell Kozlov exactly where I am. He'll send everything he has to that ridge. Then, we better be ready to return the favor. As Elena and Sullivan began their climb toward the ridge, Rodriguez positioned his remaining forces among the rocks. Dr. Morrison and the other hostages took cover in a shallow cave while Garcia and Chun found firing positions overlooking the approaches to their location. The first probing attack came 15 minutes later. A squad of mercenaries approached from the south, using military tactics to advance undercover. Rodriguez could see they were wearing body armor and carrying modern assault rifles. These are not amateur fighters. Wait for my signal, Rodriguez whispered into his radio. The mercenaries advanced to within 50 meters before Rodriguez opened fire. His M4 carbine barked as he aimed for center mass on the lead soldier. Garcia and Chin added their fire from flanking positions, creating a deadly crossfire that forced the attackers to take cover. But Rodriguez knew this was just the beginning. Kozlov was testing their defenses, looking for weak points. The real assault would come from multiple directions once the enemy commander understood their positions. Movement on the north side, Chin reported. At least 8 men moving through the trees. Rodriguez realized Kozlov was dividing his forces, preparing for a coordinated attack from multiple directions. Without Elena's sniper fire to thin their ranks, his small team would be overwhelmed within minutes. The radio crackled with Elena's voice. In position, beginning my approach to the target. Through his binoculars, Rodriguez could see the helicopter circling closer to their position. The pilot was probably trying to identify their exact location so the ground teams could coordinate their final assault. Rodriguez watched Elena's tiny figure moving across the distant ridge, her rifle slung across her back as she climbed toward a firing position. The second attack was more serious. Mercenaries advanced from both north and south simultaneously while the helicopter moved closer to provide supporting fire. Rodriguez and His team returned fire rapidly, but their ammunition was running low. Bullets sparked off the rocks around them as the enemy closed the distance. "Sir, I'm down to my last magazine," Garcia reported. Rodriguez was about to order a fighting withdrawal when the crack of Elena's rifle echoed across the valley. 800 meters away, Rodriguez saw the helicopter pilot slump forward as Elena's bullet found its mark. The aircraft began to spin out of control, its rotor wash kicking up clouds of dust as it crashed into the valley floor. The explosion was spectacular, sending a column of black smoke rising into the morning sky. More importantly, it eliminated Kozlov's ability to coordinate his ground forces effectively. "Now, move, move, move," Rodriguez shouted. They abandoned their defensive position and sprinted toward the extraction point, using the chaos and confusion following the helicopter crash to break contact with the enemy. Dr. Morrison and the other hostages ran with desperate energy, knowing their lives depended on reaching safety before Kozlov could reorganize his scattered forces. Rodriguez could hear automatic weapons fire from the ridge where Elena had taken her shot. She and Sullivan were fighting for their lives against mercenaries who were climbing toward their position. But Elena had done her job. The helicopter was down, and they had a chance to escape. The extraction point was a small clearing beside a mountain stream, surrounded by trees that would provide concealment for the incoming aircraft. Rodriguez checked his GPS as they approached. They were 15 minutes early, which meant 15 minutes of waiting while Kozlov's forces closed in around them. "Johnson, get on the radio and move up our extraction time," Rodriguez ordered. "Already tried, sir." No response from base. "We might be out of communication range." Rodriguez felt his heart sink. If the extraction helicopter was not monitoring their frequency, they could be stranded in hostile territory with no way home. The sound of pursuit was getting closer, engines and voices carrying across the mountainous terrain. Dr. Morrison collapsed beside the stream, finally showing her exhaustion. "Lieutenant, you've done everything possible. If the helicopter doesn't come, it's not your fault." Rodriguez checked his watch. They had been running for 6 hours with minimal rest. His team was operating on pure adrenaline and determination. But even the best soldiers had limits, and they were approaching theirs rapidly. That was when they heard it. The distinctive sound of American helicopter rotors, different from the Russian aircraft that had been pursuing them. Rodriguez felt a surge of hope as 2 Black Hawks appeared over the ridge, flying fast and low to avoid enemy detection. "Smoke grenades!" Rodriguez shouted. "Mark our position." Green smoke billowed up from their location as the lead helicopter circled the clearing. Rodriguez could see the door gunners scanning for threats while the pilot looked for a safe landing zone. But their relief was short-lived. The sound of approaching vehicles grew louder, and Rodriguez could see muzzle flashes from the tree line as Kozlov's men opened fire on the helicopter. The pilot was forced to pull away, unable to land under direct fire. "Sir, we need to suppress those weapons," Garcia called out. Rodriguez made a decision that went against every tactical manual he had ever studied. "Garcia, Chun, lay down covering fire. I'm going to clear that tree line." Before anyone could object, Rodriguez sprinted toward the enemy positions, his rifle firing in controlled bursts as he closed the distance. It was the kind of heroic charge that either won medals or got soldiers killed, but it was their only chance to create a safe landing zone. Chun and Garcia followed his lead, advancing on the flanks while the hostages took cover behind the helicopter landing zone. Dr. Morrison was shouting medical instructions to Dr. Parker, using the chaos to treat his broken ankle while bullets flew overhead. The firefight lasted only 3 minutes, but it felt like hours. Rodriguez fought his way through the tree line, using superior training and desperation to overwhelm the mercenary positions. When the smoke cleared, 6 enemy fighters were dead, and the rest had retreated to regroup. The Black Hawk landed immediately, its crew chief waving everyone aboard while the door gunners provided covering fire. Rodriguez counted heads as the hostages climbed into the aircraft. 12 rescued aid workers, 3 of his team members, all accounted for. "Where are Elena and Sullivan?" he shouted over the rotor noise. Johnson pointed toward the ridge where they had last seen the sniper team. "Still fighting their way out, sir." Rodriguez could see smoke rising from the ridge position. Elena and Sullivan were holding off at least a dozen mercenaries, but they would be overrun soon without support. "Tell the pilot to wait," Rodriguez ordered. The crew chief shook his head. "Sir, we've got fuel for one extraction run. If we wait much longer, we won't make it back to base." Rodriguez faced the hardest decision of his military career: save 12 hostages and 3 of his men, or risk everyone's lives trying to rescue 2 people who might already be dead. It was the kind of choice that haunted commanders for the rest of their lives. Dr. Morrison grabbed his arm. "Lieutenant, what would Elena want you to do?" Rodriguez knew the answer. Elena had risked her life to save strangers because it was the right thing to do. She would want him to save the people he could save, even if it meant leaving her behind. "Go," Rodriguez shouted to the pilot. "Get these people to safety." The Black Hawk lifted off in a cloud of dust and diesel exhaust, carrying the rescued hostages towards safety. As Rodriguez looked down at the mountains falling away beneath them, he made a silent promise to return for Elena and Sullivan, no matter what it took. But the second Black Hawk was already circling back toward the ridge position where Elena and Sullivan were making their last stand. Rodriguez watched through the aircraft's small window as rockets lit up the mountainside, providing covering fire for the trapped sniper team. Minutes that felt like hours passed before the radio crackled with Sullivan's voice. "Package secured. 2 passengers boarding now." Rodriguez felt a weight lift from his shoulders as he saw Elena and Sullivan climbing into the second helicopter. Both were wounded but alive, having fought their way through overwhelming odds to reach the extraction point. As both helicopters turned toward the safety of friendly airspace, Rodriguez reflected on what they had accomplished. 12 innocent people were going home to their families. Kozlov's mercenary organization had suffered serious losses, and Elena had proven that sometimes the most unlikely allies came from the most unexpected places. But Rodriguez knew this was not over. Elena had mentioned a larger conspiracy, someone paying mercenaries to target American forces in East Africa. Kozlov was just one piece of a larger puzzle, and until they identified the real enemy, more innocent lives would be at risk. As the mountains of Ethiopia faded into the distance behind them, Rodriguez began planning his next move. He had a feeling he would be working with Ghost again very soon, and next time they would be hunting the puppet master who had been pulling Kozlov's strings. The war was far from over, but today at least the good guys had won.